Welcome to the Putback presented by 888 Casino. Get $20 in free play by signing up today with 888 Casino. No deposit necessary, New Jersey only. I'm Ian Begley here with Chris Williamson. Chris, what do we have for the baseline this week?
Some Knicks rumors potentially about a point guard, Collin Sexton. There was a report from The Athletic that the Knicks are the most aggressive suitors for Collin Sexton. What can you tell us about the latest of that, Ian?
I can't tell you their level of aggressiveness in pursuing Sexton. I don't know that right now, but it makes sense because the Knicks are searching for a long-term answer at point guard, and Sexton's a young, talented player. I think the Knicks have had interest and will continue to have interest in any young, talented player, particularly a lead guard, that may be available. You know, we know Sexton's going to be available via trade for the right price from the Cavaliers. But I do know that the Knicks, over the course of the regular season, had discussed regularly free agent options at point guard, what those free agents might look like. And so I don't think this is a Collin Sexton or bust situation at point guard. I do know that the Knicks have looked into any and all avenues. One of those other avenues is the NBA draft. And when you talk about point guards in the draft, Sharife Cooper certainly comes up. Who knows where he's going to be selected? And I don't know if the Knicks have had him in for a workout yet or they haven't. But I do know that, other teams have said the Knicks are trying to gather intel on Cooper, maybe to determine where he goes in the draft, because they're trying to gather intel on which teams like Cooper, how teams feel about Cooper. So my takeaway from that is maybe they're looking to see where Cooper goes in this draft. And if they have interest in trading up for him, they'll know what spot they would have to trade up to get him. So just something to note as we get closer to the NBA draft. Chris, you usually do the introduction for our guest, but I just wanted to say a little something about this week's guest, Book Richardson. Some of you may know Richardson for being involved in the NCAA bribery scandal. He did prison time for his role in that scandal. And you may think, well, why would people have him on to talk about basketball? But I would say this. I've known Book Richardson for a very long time, nearly 15 years. I know what's in his heart. He's been contrite in talking about the mistakes that he made. If you want to hear what Book has to say about the NCAA scandal and its aftermath, you should check out his interview with Chris Johnson on Chris Johnson's YouTube page. You can check out an interview he did with the New York Daily News by Stephen Bondi. Really spells everything out. I just wanted to talk to Book about basketball because he is a fountain of information when it comes to this game. He's loved and respected by so many people in this game, and he knows the young players in this game very, very well. And so that's what we want to talk to him about in our show.
Yeah, that's right. And we had a great conversation with him as he's the director of the boys basketball program for New York Gauchos. And he has a particularly deep knowledge about this year's draft class. And it was a really entertaining and informative conversation that we had.
Book, one of the names on everyone's draft board right now is Moses Moody. What do you think about his game and what he can bring to the next level?
I think when you look at a guy like Moses Moody coming out of Arkansas, man, everyone talks this 3-and-D guy. But especially when you look in the playoffs, you talk about having great length, who can defend multiple positions, who can make open shots. I think that's the most important thing, especially for these young guys trying to get into this new NBA. And when I say new NBA, it's definitely different than the NBA I grew up in from the standpoint of skill is at a premium now. If you go 5 smalls or 5 bigs, if you can pass, dribble, shoot, cut, you're going to have an opportunity. And I think Moody he's going to have a great opportunity because of how he's played and what he's learned in college. I think he had great coaching, but I think it's going to translate to this next level because he can defend and he can defend multiple positions, on the perimeter.
Sharife Cooper, obviously Auburn, talented guard. What are your thoughts on his game and how he might fit in the league?
Sharife has the benefit of winning every place he's been. I think you overlook the fact that from AAU 13 on, from 13 on, he's been a national champion. EYBL, he led in scoring and assists. In high school, he's won multiple MVPs, but his teams they've won big. And when when you're that undersized, he reminds me a lot of Trae Young, just with his control, his control of the ball, his feel for the game. And he puts so much pressure on you because he makes winning plays. Watching him this year in Auburn, man, he was such a magician with the basketball. And I'm not rooting for him because he's an undersized point guard. I'm rooting for him because he has immense skill. He's great with the basketball. And I think the one thing that's underrated about him, he's tough enough to defend.
And he's somebody who's really good, on the pick and roll, with his skill and versatility and speed. And when you look at the Knicks roster, specifically RJ Barrett, which type of player in this year's draft would complement him the best, especially considering that the Knicks see RJ as part of their core for the long-term future?
When I think about it, and especially watching the Knicks, but also complimenting RJ and seeing someone, who Tibbs would really value, I definitely think Jaden Springer. And I say that because I've watched him, as we've talked about, he's New York City royalty. I've watched him, man, and it's like, well, when he doesn't jump out at you, what does he do well? But you look at he is so productive. The dude is productive, and especially when you talk about having an emphasis on getting a stop, being able to have a guy like Mikal Bridges, right, man? He defends every single possession. I mean, he's going to make sure that he has an opportunity to play. He's going to have an opportunity to play. He's going to play late. That's how I see Springer. I watched that young man at 18 years old, and he's the youngest player in the draft this year. And especially for Tibbs, man, when you look at the success that he's had, could he be Jimmy Butler? I'm not putting any type of pressure on a kid like that because Jimmy Butler is one of the best players in our game right now. But when you watch him score on all three levels, I think Jaden has an opportunity to do it. Again, especially with what the Knicks and complimenting RJ, I think that's a great compliment.
It's time to go to a place with thousands of NBA GMs, head coaches, and scouts. I'm talking about NBA Twitter. So let's go in the paint.
You asked Twitter, the Knicks should have a lot of cap space this summer, given that who is your ideal free agent acquisition at PG and who would you realistically want to trade for? You asked the internet, here's what they answered. Hospy says Gary Trent Jr. would be my number one free agent pickup for the long run, but Lowry would be on a short deal to be fine, use of space too. Non-realistic trade for SGA or Dame.
Well, I think that Gary Trent Jr. is a fine young player. I don't see Toronto letting him leave because they traded for him. So I think they're motivated to re-sign him, but we'll see what the Knicks do. They can go big on a restricted free agent offer sheet if they'd like to, because they'll have the money to do so.
Lord_Los18 says it's Lonzo or bust unless y'all trying to trade an arm and a leg to get Dame or Beal. It ain't worth it unless we got commitment from another star.
I agree with him on a Lillard and a Beal trade. I mean, if you're gutting the roster to get one of those players here, it doesn't make a lot of sense. And I don't think Bradley Beal particularly would be attracted by a situation where he was coming to New York, but the roster was gutted. He's going to be a free agent. So you have to take that into account. With Lonzo, as recently as late in the regular season, I still hadn't heard anything definitive on him. Seemed to be mixed opinions on Lonzo within the organization.
And Ahmed Rosario, not to be confused with the former Mets player, said if CP3 is available, even at his age, with the way he's playing now, I don't think there could be any justification to not giving him exactly what he wants. Lowry and Conley are solid fallback options.
Yeah, I think the Phoenix Suns will also be motivated to give Chris Paul everything and anything he wants if he does opt out of his player option for next season. So the Knicks would have competition there. We know that people in the organization view Paul with high regard because they were interested in trading for him last offseason. But I think it would cost a lot to get Chris Paul to New York because Phoenix will be very motivated to re-sign him.
And Knicks Win Track tweeted at you saying, dream free agents, Chris Paul, if he opts out for a long-term deal, Kyle Lowry, realistic trade targets, signing trades for Lonzo Ball, Devontae Graham.
Devontae Graham's an interesting one. He's going to be a restricted free agent. I believe his name had come up internally with the Knicks, and obviously he's the kind of player where if you are pairing him alongside a Julius Randle or an RJ Barrett, he's going to be able to knock down shots, but he doesn't need to really dominate the ball. So you may not have to change the idea of going through Randle on offense, going through Barrett on offense if you're the Knicks and you sign Devontae Graham.
And lastly, Stratocaster 101 replied, free agents, Lonzo Ball, Spencer Dinwiddie, and Michael Conley.
Well, to Alex, I appreciate the question, man. Dinwiddie is interesting to me. Some people think that he would consider the Knicks if they came after him because he'd like to stay in New York. We'll see what happens there. Mike Conley, I would assume that he re-signs in Utah, so I don't think he'll be an option for the Knicks. But if he's looking to go elsewhere, I'm sure the Knicks would have some interest. Shawn Farmer has trained players at all levels of the game, NBA, overseas, college, high school. So we asked him to come in to break down specific aspects of some of the young Knicks players' games and what that might look like going forward into next season. Obi Toppin, he played good minutes for New York in the playoffs against Atlanta. Seemed like he came on late. What did you see from Obi with regards to his jump shot? How effective did you think it was throughout his rookie season?
Well, the Obi that you just described, late, that's the operative word, late, because I thought that would be the Obi Toppin in the beginning. But,
Yeah.
you know, we both know that injuries played a part. And then I didn't know how Tibbs was going to institute him into the rotation. Speaking of his jump shot, there's some things that I really love about his jump shot. I went back, looked at the tape of him in college, and, you know, he's long. He's a really good catch and shoot guy. Where I think Obi needs to improve is taking people off the dribble and raising up on people like Kevin Durant. I think Obi can develop into that type of guy. And in order to be an elite floor spacer, he's going to have to tweak some things mechanically. Because if you go back and look at him in college, his first year, he shot almost 52% from the three-point line. I think his numbers would have been right at an average of about 41, 42% for his career, which is really good for a guy his size. But in order for him to develop into that floor spacer and that guy that can be somewhat unguardable, is him going to that next phase of taking people off the dribble, or as I say in my training, dribble into the post and elevating up over people that are smaller than he is.
And he's got the athleticism to do that.
Yes.
He puts himself in that position. Did you see, like, with the mechanics of his jump shot, he started to knock down shots again later in the season. Did you see anything that you think he can build upon, you know, the next few years of his career when you look at the mechanics of his shot?
Well, the inconsistency in the elevation. And what I mean by that is sometimes he elevates really high and shoots it at the top of his jump. And then sometimes, I guess when he gets to feeling it, he don't elevate as high. And also, I think he has a little bit of that chicken wing flaw. And that chicken wing, and see, here's the thing, and I don't like to mention other players when we're talking about the Knicks guys, but it's a simple fix with Giannis. He has the chicken wing flaw. Ben Simmons, chicken wing flaw. And some guys, we can go back to Reggie Miller. Reggie Miller had an unorthodox shot, but he's perfected that shot. Obi, there's a hitch right there in his between his elbow and his shoulder. Mm-hmm. Okay, he needs to straighten that out. Other than that, I didn't see too much was wrong with it. And then his God hand, his palm has a tendency to face the rim on the release of the shot. And those are fixable things. But Obi is a very, very good shooter. He didn't really take a lot of shots. Only playing 11 minutes per game. But I think as he gradually gets more minutes, he's 23 years old. He's got probably 2 years to really become a really, really good shooter.
For Book, Shawn, and Chris, I'm Ian Begley. That's it for this week's episode of The Putback, presented by 888 Casino. We'll see you next week, everybody.
How should Leon Rose and Scott Perry approach the Knicks' first-round picks? That's the subject of this week's SNY Fan Choice, presented by 888 Casino. Sign up to 888 Casino today and get $20 in free play. No deposit necessary.